it is my pleasure to introduce our celebrity and Renaissance member, Donna Apidone. Donna worked for Capital Public Radio for 24 years. Yeah. How many of you listened to her on everybody? Okay. I didn't even need to ask that question. But since she left Capital Public Radio, Donna's been teaching, writing, speaking, of course. And we're so lucky to have her as a Renaissance member. She's teaching a transformation seminar all about finding purpose in life. So I haven't had a chance to take it, but I'm going to sign up for it one of these days. And she does this not only for the Renaissance Society, but for congregations throughout the community. The course is based on her book, also titled Transformission. She's published a collection of brief, vibrant motivators called Drive Time Meditations. And she writes for two national PBS outlets, nextavenue.org and America's Heartland. And she's been published in Sacramento News and Review and the Sacramento Observer. So she conducts live audience interviews for the Mondavi Center at UC Davis Mini Medical School. She was ordained in New York City in 2009, and she speaks at 9 congregations in Northern California. In 2023, she received an Artistic License Award from California Lawyers for the Arts. So she is indeed a local celebrity, not only for Sacramento, but for around the region. So please welcome Donna Apidone.
Thank you, Deborah. It's so nice to be here. How are you all today? Good. Glad to hear it. I wanted to start by telling you about a luncheon I had about a month ago with a friend of mine who is 94 years old. He is, as far as we can tell, he's the last of the parents of my high school class. So whenever I have an opportunity to see him, I like to do that. When I saw him a month ago, I was trying to think of things to talk about, and I remembered that he had a military history. So I said, "Remind me, Carl, was that World War II?" And he said, "Oh, no, Donna, I'm not that old." Well, you're 94, Carl. I'm not so sure. It was an easy mistake for me to make. He was in Korea, but it was an easy mistake for me to make because he writes so much about World War II. That's his passion. That's what keeps him going these days, spending time researching and writing to write little books about World War II. But it was also a great example of some of the intergenerational faux pas that happened. And this time I was the person who caused the error. That's what we're going to talk about today. Some of the things that happen between generations and some of the things that have come out of transformation that have to do with intergenerational work. In 2023, the Surgeon General released a report about isolation, calling it an epidemic. And in that, he said that estimates were that social isolation among older adults account for $6.7 billion in additional Medicare spending annually. $6.7 billion as a result of people feeling isolated and having care around that. That's a lot of money. Now, it would have been nice if they had phrased that in the Surgeon General's report in terms of our mental health instead of the dollars spent, but it doesn't always go that way. Still, that number really gets our attention. It's all in the way we look at things, and it's all in the way we have an opportunity to shift our perspective, and that's a little bit about today's conversation. Dr. Vivek Murthy, it was at the time the Surgeon General, and in that report, he identified isolation as an epidemic. Well, it was easy to think that it was related to COVID because it was 2023 when the report came out. So it would be easy to think that lots of people in our age groups were isolated during COVID. That was the logical conclusion, but we always kind of knew maybe there was more to it than that. I understood isolation from a different perspective, which you probably never thought about when you were listening to Morning Edition during my 24 years. I spent more than 20 years working that overnight shift, spending 6 hours a day in a little room that I measured. It was 7 feet by 8 feet. There were no windows. The walls were padded, but that was for soundproofing, not for me being nuts. And I had to sound for all the world like I was uniquely connected to each one of you listening, even though I was standing in a room feeling like the most isolated person on the planet. So it's a different kind of isolation, but I really understood what the Surgeon General was talking about when he issued that report. People who are isolated know how to hide it, but that doesn't mean we're not isolated. When you look around you and wonder who you know who might be isolated, it could be someone who isn't acting like it at all. So keep that in mind when you're being a good neighbor and a good family member. Right there on page 1 of the Surgeon General's report, we find these words: the physical health consequences of poor or insufficient connection include a 29% increased risk of heart disease, a 32% increased risk of stroke, and a 50% increased risk of developing dementia for older adults. In addition, lacking social connection increases risk of premature death by 60%. Those numbers are high, and they're all related to isolation. In addition to our physical health, again, in the words of the Surgeon General, loneliness and isolation contribute substantially to mental health challenges. In adults, the risk of developing depression among people who report feeling lonely often is more than double that of people who rarely or never feel lonely. More than double. That's a lot. And again, all because of isolation. Now, it would have been easy to read Dr. Murthy's report in 2023 and think, oh, well, we've always known that isolation and loneliness were a topic for people in our age groups. No surprise there. But also, there was something else going on. It's clear that college students are just as isolated as older adults. Now, we know that teens and 20s had a very difficult time during COVID. That was well documented. There were studies. It didn't stop after the universities reopened. There were a couple of studies, one North Carolina at Chapel Hill in July of last year, that said a lot of, well, 1 in 5 college students feels isolated on a college campus. This suggests that there's more at play than social media. Social media can be a deterrent to isolation, or it can assist isolation. It goes both ways. It can really isolate young people or people our age, or it can help people to interact. But 1 in 5 college students, as of a year ago, feeling isolated on campus. We think of it as a big social place, but they weren't feeling it that way. Here's a statistic for you. This is from a survey by the Cigna Group. 79% of adults aged 18 to 24 report feeling lonely, compared to 41% of seniors aged 66 and older. They're hurting a lot more than we are. Look at that number, almost double, 79% of young people and only 41% of people our age. And another statistic for you. From a survey of nearly 1,100 college and university students a year ago now, February 2024, feeling more than 4 times more likely to experience psychological distress. Those are some pretty serious numbers for us and for them. A little bit more information among the LGBTQ plus students, an increased likelihood of experiencing loneliness, with 70% identifying as lonely. Loneliness and social isolation, according to Brigham Young University, the same as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. 15 cigarettes a day, that's a lot. So, now that I've told you all that good news, let me redirect you. And let's talk about some possibilities here. What are the possibilities for us and for the young people in our lives? Well, there is a belief system for all of us that we can do better than we've done so far, that we can improve on what we do. There's also the understanding that when we do things we love, they bring us joy, right? It's always more fun to do something you like than something you don't like. That makes a lot of sense. And our joy can help reduce the feeling of loneliness. So it makes sense that we do all the good things and fun things in life that we possibly can. My dad used to say, you can do anything you set your mind to do. And he lived that. And that's part of the message I want to convey to you. You can make that change. You can make that switch. You can make that adjustment in your life to address loneliness for yourself, for your family, for anyone else you know. And it might just be as easy as a new mindset and a new way to look at things. Just as I redirected you from looking at some horrible numbers to having a little bit lighter and brighter way of looking at things, we can direct somebody who's feeling lonely into feeling like, maybe they can change the world, because they can. It's a matter of mindset sometimes, and it's also a matter of purpose. You heard about that class, that group that I lead, Transformation. You know that it's true. People in that room know that it's true. It's how we redirect ourselves. And you probably live on purpose every day. I'm thinking a lot of people in this room probably do. You are good at something. You know yourself well enough that you are living in your purpose, and you're not even thinking about it because it's so easy. But because you're doing what you're passionate about, you're lighter and you're brighter than if you were not doing those things. People who feel lonely and isolated can learn what you know, but maybe we have to point it out to them. And you are going to be good ambassadors of this opportunity to do that. So the question is, how do we persuade someone who's feeling lonely to turn things a little bit and start living in their purpose? Well, having taught this class for 20 years, I can answer your question. It's not that difficult. There's a matter of persuasion involved. Most of the people who I have had in transformation classes in the last 20 years, just 2 years now at Sac State, have been age 55 or older, and they walk into the room saying, I don't know what my purpose is. I have no idea. The fact is they do. They do know. It's a matter of uncovering it, not discovering it, not learning it, just looking a little bit more closely, finding where joy is, letting go of some other things that aren't so joyful, and then making a decision to do something a little bit differently than they've done before. The people in the cohort in 2024 said they wished that they had known their purpose when they were in college, and now, with grandchildren in high school and college, they wish that those kids understood their purpose. We can make that happen. You can make that happen as ambassadors of this process. So let me tell you a little bit about the transformation process. It is based in a communication theory called Monroe's motivated sequence. Monroe's motivated sequence comes from the 1930s. And Monroe probably didn't know that it would still be in use almost 100 years later, but it is. You see it every time you hear or watch or look at any kind of advertisement. That's what he had in mind with the motivated sequence. It's a matter of persuasion to get you from where you are now to really needing to have a clean floor and to using that particular floor cleaner to make it happen. That was Monroe doing his work. And by the way, for about 10 or 20 years, it was also used very all over the country in public broadcasting fund drives. It's used as a strategy for a lot of different things. We use it as a strategy not to convince someone else to do something, but to look at ourselves. You can use Monroe's sequence to look inside and say, that's what I was doing, but I want to do something different, and I'm going to follow this particular process, this particular path to make that happen. And that's what we do in transformation. It's a new way of being, not so much what you do, but how you are. It's a new way of being, and it's based entirely on purpose. And I want to tell you about one person. We're going to hear from several people who were in last year's cohort and what they have to say about using their time in transformation to do intergenerational work. But I want to start with telling you one story in particular. We use Las Vegas rules in transformation because a lot of stuff is revealed in that classroom that's very personal and very personal. So we don't use Zoom, we don't record it. And anybody who has, whose words are being spoken today gave me permission to use what they have to say. So with those Las Vegas rules, everything that happens in the room stays in the room. We'll hear from a few people. There's one gentleman, I'll just say he's in his late 70s. He had a lot of interests when he walked into the room. He said he wasn't really sure what his purpose was, but he had a long list of things he wanted to do to fulfill his purpose. And as we talked about purpose and talked about transformation, he started to understand that transforming and purpose is not about doing, it's about being. And that became very, very clear. It's also about empathy. Empathy is the secret ingredient to transformation. By focusing on how we are with other people, not wanting the reward for ourselves, but focusing on an element of service for people, that makes a big difference. Not only do we uncover our purpose, but we excel at it because we're doing the work for someone else. And this is the equation that I use. Empathy plus service plus action equals purpose. Empathy, service, and action are the keys here. So one day this gentleman walked into the room and he said the most amazing things that the people in the room had ever heard. He told our group that there was something in his community, in his circle of people, that he was so passionate about that he would do anything for the people he loved, that he would be willing to fight for them. He said that at the age he is, he really doesn't care. He has less time yet to come than the time that has already gone by and nothing to lose. So he felt that if he got arrested or hurt in the process, that was okay because it was worth it to do what he had to do for the next generation. And we all sat there and went, because of course we all feel that way about someone in our lives, but to have that passion, to hear that passion and to hear that devotion, empathy was there, service was there, action was there. He had put it all together. He knew exactly what his purpose was. It just needed to come to him. He just needed to see it. And I have no doubt that he's acting on that now. He's somebody who's passionate anyway, but the way he inspired us that day was amazing. If everyone could be that inspiration, if we could inspire each other that way, just think what a different and purposeful world this would be. And that's what happens. We do inspire each other. We always want to work a little bit harder for the ones we love, and other people feel that energy when you do it. It's all a good thing. You can probably tell by now that my purpose is to help people uncover their purpose. I am very passionate about that, and I'm quite sure that it's what keeps me healthy and what keeps me going because I'm inspired by everybody who walks into that room. And I'm convinced that the people who walk into that room and work toward their purpose are feeling a lot less isolated, but they're changing the world. They're ending isolation for themselves and everybody around them because they are so passionate about what they're doing. So now I'm very enthusiastic about looking at all of the other ways that we can prepare the next group of members for Renaissance Society. We've already had some conversations about that. We've already been looking at the new group, the millennials. They're ready for Renaissance Society any minute. They don't think so, but they are. Won't they be surprised? But they have much different needs than we have. They have a different set of criteria for their lives. They have different needs. They have different ways of looking at the world than we have. So we have to get ready for them as an organization and as a set of workshops and classes. We have to get ready for that. And then it's going to be Gen X and Gen Y and Gen Z. And before you know it, these rooms are going to be filled with people who are now kids, you know, barely, not even off this campus yet. And they'll be sitting in these seats before we know it. The interesting thing about Gen Z, they're the ones who are in college now. They're the ones who would like to be partners in crime with us. You know how that is. Every generation doesn't like their parents that much, but they really dig their grandparents, right? So we're the grandparents to the kids who are in college now. They can't wait to get together with us. They want to be partners in crime with us. They want to do fun stuff with us. If we engage them, we can make that happen. And they will be looking at their purpose. And by the time they're sitting in our chairs with gray hair, they're going to have a much better idea of their place in the world and what it is they're meant to do. Now, the important thing about this, I think, is that we give them agency, that we make sure that they are able to play the role of expert so that they can walk in and say, yeah, I'm not listening to these people with gray hair. I am interacting with them and we're learning from each other. Let's let them observe us so they can find their own answers. There are so many places where we hear about us being the mentors. What if we weren't? What if they're the mentors and we're just hanging out with them and learning from them? That's a nice way to look at things, and it's a really nice way to raise them and let them mature. Because they have a lot in common with those of us who are north of 60. I love that expression. I'm not old, I'm north of 60. I recently spent a few weeks as a member of an international cohort that explores these topics. It was a very interesting group of people trying to figure out what people do on a regional basis for their communities, for intergenerational work within small communities, how that then blossoms and takes place in the world, how that spreads. I was at the top end, age-wise, of this cohort. And I noticed that the other folks, the folks who run the senior programs at the JCC or the community center, wherever they are in any particular community around the world, they're in their 30s and their 40s, and they were talking about our generation like we needed to be propped up or something. Completely incapable. Well, they were feeling sorry for us as they were talking to me. They were feeling sorry for me. Well, there are certain things you can't do. And I started singing the Grateful Dead song in my head, Old and in the Way. I don't know about you, but I am neither old nor in the way. Are you? See? Yeah. So that it's good that we have those conversations so that we see each other. But you know what was funny about that? I made the same mistake, and I'm making it right now. I'm talking about them as them. I'm talking about them as those young kids who just don't understand us. So the same thing happens in both directions, and we can all be a lot more conscious of how we talk about each other and what we learn from each other. Another example is a really good friend of mine who's 40 years old, who got in touch with me. She wanted to interact on something or other, just like 2 weeks ago. And she said, "Do you text?" I know I'm a dinosaur, but yes, I do text. She didn't mean to, it was so innocent on her part and so cute, but it just made me laugh. It was such a great example. So my intergenerational work, your intergenerational work, there's nothing wrong with being a surrogate grandparent at an elementary school to help kids read. That's a wonderful thing to do. But there's other work that we can do in intergenerational work. And some of it could be very big and some of it could be very small, but it's all work that does need to be done. One of the most famous intentional intergenerational living communities. It's a couple of big words there, but just think about that. Intentional, intergenerational living communities. What a beautiful concept, isn't it? A co-housing situation that got a lot of press maybe 20 years ago. It's in Cleveland. It's called Judson Manor. It's an amazingly beautiful old hotel that was turned into a home mostly for flats, apartments, mostly for people our age. But what's interesting about Judson Manor is that it's right across the street from two world-class arts organizations. It's right across the street from the home of the Cleveland Orchestra and right across the street from the Cleveland Museum of Art. And it's walking distance to the Cleveland Institute of Music. So in 2010, they had this great idea. Let's let some music students from the Institute live at Judson Manor. And it's working out beautifully. It's a great thing to do. The the students have the opportunity to pull people together for little impromptu concerts. You know, they're doing trios and duets as part of their classes. Yeah, come on in Thursday night. Let's listen in a room like this and let's hear some music. And the people who live there full time, who are our age, have companions and dog walkers. So it works out for everybody. It's a really nice thing. Everybody benefits. They also have empathy, service, and action in both generations. So they're achieving purpose in a really nice way. It's a nice combination. Not the first of its kind. University of Southern California did something similar in 1984. It's very popular in parts of Europe because in Europe it's so co-generational anyway. You know, apartment buildings have several generations of the same family pretty commonly. So the Europeans don't really have to learn how to do this. They're already finding ways to do it. But there are places like Denmark with apartment houses that intentionally cohabitate people our age with young families and also people who have disabilities, and they're shared living and cooking facilities. So you have no choice but to interact. And again, there's a lot of dog walking and babysitting going on, but there's also a lot of intergenerational laughter and learning, and it's all put together very nicely. A record 64 million Americans, by the way, that's 20% of people already in this country live in intergenerational housing. So 20% compared to what's happening in some other parts of the country or other parts of the world is really a very small number. We have some opportunities for growth in that. And by the way, if you're wondering where to look for some of this information, all you have to do is Google intergenerational, and you'll come up with all kinds of things. Cogenerate.org is one organization. There's a Journal of Intergenerational Relationships. Who knew? Just all kinds of opportunities. Just Google intergenerational. You'll find more information than you ever wanted to have. Now, it sounds really easy to build community. It sounds like, let's build community. How hard could that be? Really? That could be very difficult if you don't know what you're doing. And if you've ever moved to a new city, you know how long it takes to make some new friends. So it takes some intentional work to make that happen. I told you about one person who really found purpose in the transformation class and is doing some very important intergenerational work. We're going to hear from a couple of other people now too. First of all, I want to introduce you to all of the people who were in the 2024 cohort of transformation. If you would stand, you didn't know I was going to do this to you. Because they're such cool people. I want to tell you first about someone named David. He sent me didn't know I was going to make this presentation, but sent me an email 2 weeks ago and gave his permission for me to tell you this. I wanted to let you know through the class I've come a long way to achieve my purpose, training my rescue dog for pet therapy. That's not only intergenerational, that's yeah. He's doing amazing things here. So more from David. We joined the Capital Therapy Dogs organization this fall and have started doing visits to assisted living, memory care, high school, the California Office of Emergency Services Operations Center, a cerebral palsy day out program. And he says it's wonderful to see when folks light up. And then he adds this, just when you think that his dog must be the most amazing dog in the world, David writes, one of the more amazing things about this is that Sierra is sitting now. It took all through the summer to teach her how to sit at all. Nice work from David. I want to introduce you to a couple more people, starting with Rob Taylor.
Well, following Donna talking is a bit of a challenge, but let's give it a go. Give me 1 second here and let me pull this up real quick. I am a graduate of the transformation class, would advise anybody to take it. But today we're talking about purpose, we're talking about difference in generations, and we're I'd like to share with you a little story about me, and everything Donna's been talking about today just kind of fell into place recently. Um, and that my daughter, Lauren, when she was younger, growing up, she was my purpose. And when she graduated from high school, she elected to go ahead and attend a college that was about 3 hours away. When my purpose, I realized all of a sudden at that point, was going to go away to college, and it vanished like a cloud in the sky. So, but fast forward, there was a good something good that happened out of this. But fast forward about 15 years, and Lauren graduated from college, and she became a very big somebody in a large corporation. And on top of that, she had a son. His name is Finn. And before Finn even left the hospital, I realized that Finn was my new purpose in life. And I wanted him to be a big part of my life as much as I hoped that he would, excuse me, or I would be a big part of his life. The only thing that is that I'm not his father, I'm his grandfather, and there is a generational difference to the tune of about 76 years. So that we're going to give that a go as far as overcoming. Now, Finn doesn't talk much yet, probably soon to change. He does show a lot of, I understand everything that he says, even though it's not coming out of his mouth. He does a happy dance and gyrates his hips and shows celebration and happiness. He clicks his tongue on the top of his roof that shows curiosity and wonderment. He also grunts, whooshes, makes noise, verbal screeches that sound a lot like a Tyrannosaurus dinosaur. I understand him explicitly. Very strange happening here. Every purpose must have a commitment, and mine is that I've decided that I'm going to go ahead and spend 1 day a week taking care of Finn, week in, week out, every week. And my job is, as far as caring with Finn, as you realize, being grandparents and having kids, it's pretty exhausting. But that probably is a misnomer. But the joy, the entertainment, the laughter he gives me is all worthwhile. And it's my purpose, and I hope it's my purpose for life.
Thank you, Rob. I've seen you do that happy dance too. He does take after you. Nancy Murray, a lot of you people know Nancy Murray, but she couldn't be here today. She did send her story. So let me read that to you. Purpose to me drives what I do each day. And while I've always been a driven person, slowing down after retirement to reflect and think about how I want to spend my time and energy now has been very helpful. In one class I took with Renaissance Society, and I think it was Ken Cross's class that she's referring to, we developed a mission statement. Mine was to compassionately work for justice in the world, including plants, animals, and people. I took that work on mission and have been implementing it as my purpose. I've been an environmental lawyer for most of my 37-year legal career. 14 years ago, I took out the lawn in my front yard and replaced it with drought-tolerant plants. At the time, it was hard to find drought-tolerant plants. I started volunteering with the Sacramento Valley Conservancy, focusing on their native plant sales and their nascent native plant propagation yard. At each native plant sale, I got to work with young student volunteers who are just learning about the beneficial effects of native plants for the local bees and butterflies, and are excited by that. I get excited by their enthusiasm for developing local habitat that better serves our native wildlife. So she's teaching this next generation, but letting them teach her as she's going. She also talked about what she does with the Habitat for Humanity Unity Build. She dragged me along to that this year. It was a wonderful thing that really started based in this community and is now going on around the country. And the the opportunity that we have when we're on these builds to get to work with side by side with people who are a lot younger than us and a lot older than us. So she talked a little bit about that too. We have one more story about purpose, isolation, and co-generational efforts. And then if you have any questions, we can take those. I'd like to introduce Trish Fontana, who is also part of the class of 2024.
Good afternoon. My name is Trish Fontana, and I'm also a proud graduate of Donna's 2024 Transformation class. I wanted to share a quote with all of you that really spoke to me about aging. Aging is an extraordinary process where you become the person you always should have been. And you kind of have to think about that for a second. And we'll get back to this at the very end. I was made here at Sac State. And I owe a great deal of thanks to two amazing professors who encouraged me to pursue an internship at the California State Capitol. And I just retired after almost 40 years there. So I want to give a shout out to former Communication Studies Chair, Dr. Barbara O'Connor, and Professor Gerald McDaniels, who supported me and encouraged me every step of the way. It was at the state capitol that at the age of 19, my purpose in life became clearly defined and sparked a career in public service, helping others. For me, a sense of purpose comes with a sense of responsibility. My incredible mentors showed me that public service is the opportunity to make a difference. It's the putting me it's the putting we before me in our daily lives. I went on to mentor hundreds of interns and fellows in every job that I had. Most of these students were decades younger than me, but age didn't matter when it came to our shared core beliefs. We learned from each other, working on legislation and programs, supporting military families, helping those with disabilities, protecting the environment, and addressing women's issues. I watched many of them go on to pursue incredible careers related to public service. When I retired 3 years ago, I felt completely disoriented, lonely, and that my life had lost meaning. It was a really hard time for me. I soon realized what I missed more than anything was a sense of community and being a part of helping others. And then I found the Elk Grove Food Bank, where I now volunteer at the clothes closet. One of my favorite assignments is putting together boxes of needy clothes items for students and their families, which are submitted by the Elk Grove school teachers. I never meet the students, but I picture their faces when they open up and see the box with brand new jacket, a pair of Nike shoes, some socks, and sometimes even a new backpack. Many of these children have always worn hand-me-down clothes, and sometimes I include a stuffed animal because almost everyone needs a furry friend. Finally, in retirement, I learned that change can be very scary, but it can also be very powerful. And of course, I can now add that being a part of the Renaissance Society and being back in this beautiful campus has certainly filled my soul. I've truly found my place in the world again. I made cards with this quote for each of you. It's on the table here. And hope on the days you may be struggling with your place in the world, it reminds you you're already exactly where you need to be. And once again, aging is an extraordinary process where you become the person you always should have been. It's actually a quote from David Bowie, who is a rock and roll singer from England. And I came across it like just a few months ago when Donna had talked about me coming and doing this, because I kept thinking about, everyone thinks that aging is such a horrible process. We are so smart. We are funny and we know so much. And I have laughed probably more in my retirement than I probably did in all those years working. So embrace it, love it, and just be kind to yourself.
So now you have some idea why I fall in love with everybody who comes through the door of that classroom. Former Surgeon General Dr. Murthy came up with these 6 pillars as part of his report. 6 pillars to advance social connection. The first one is to strengthen social infrastructure in local communities, and these are all things you can do. So that's why I'm sharing them with you. Enact pro-connection public policies. We're in the capital city. We have this power to do these things. Mobilize the health sector, reform digital environments, deepen our knowledge, and cultivate a culture of connection. It's that last one that I want to give you in a little bit more detail. Cultivating a culture of connection, according to Dr. Murthy, includes these elements. Cultivating values of kindness, respect, service, and commitment to one another. We can do that. Model connection values in positions of leadership and influence. You all have your circles of influence, and you can do this. Expand conversations on social connection in schools, in workplaces, in communities. And we could add in Renaissance society to that. So here are the questions that I would like you to consider answering in your life. As you leave this room, as you talk to your friends and family, look at these things. How can we connect with people of college age? We don't necessarily have to mentor them. They can mentor us. But how can we connect with them? And how can we connect with the 30s and the 40s? How can we connect with the 90s? How do we interact with generations that are above and below ours? How do we eliminate the differences between generations and tap the best of all generations? How do we use age as a unifier rather than a divider? Why are we talking about us and them? It's all us. And how do we encourage intergenerational learning and sharing? These are the questions I hope that you can take with you and talk about on a regular basis. And there is one possible path. You know, Monroe's motivated sequence is a 5-step process. Transformation is a 5-step process. So of course I had to come up with a 5-step process for how we might go about answering these questions, and here it is. Let's identify the themes. What do generations have in common? We eat, we communicate, we laugh, we entertain ourselves. Just those 4 for starters. We can find some common ground in there that are themes that we can share with each other. Let's engage both generations, knowing, and I'm talking right now about the ones who are in college with our generation. We all have different needs and we all have different backgrounds. We know tech is going to be very important with the youngers, so let's figure out how to engage them using tech, and let's figure out how to use the connection strategies for those of us who are north of 60, the styles that we're used to, and let's teach each other those styles so that we can interact successfully. And then let's create opportunities. Are they classes? Are they dinners? Are they a walk in the park? What are we going to do to create the possibilities for having this happen? You may remember that when the UK had as its prime minister Theresa May, she appointed a minister of loneliness. And now it's our turn. We are the ambassadors. We are the ministers of loneliness. And we can take this on and make it our opportunity to share this opportunity. We can do it by encouraging purpose, and we can include co-generational work to make sure that it happens successfully. And we can start right now in this room and as we walk out of this room, because we can do anything we set our minds to do. Thank you.
That's the right
We're going to use that.
So whatever questions you have, Mike will run up there with the mic. Mike with the mic. Oh, and see, we're going to make you run all the way to the back of the room, right, for starters there.
In the front.
You're
path to use tech to reach youngers. I don't know how to do that. But to me, it seems like an oxymoron because I think tech is the problem with isolation, that youngers are looking at their phones instead of trying to talk to each other. So I don't know how that would even happen.
So two things, let them teach you. Let them teach you. What tech would we use in this situation to make this happen? If we want to get together and do X with my generation and your generation, what tech would you bring into it that would make that interesting for both of us? Ask them, since we don't know. And how it is the source of isolation. The people who've been in the class are going to laugh when I say this. What if it weren't? What if it wasn't? What if it wasn't the source of isolation? What if we look at it as the source of community instead and start looking at things that way and remind all age groups that tech can be used to bring us together? Who else?
I'm sorry you had to go through years in that small room. But we appreciated it. I loved listening to you then.
Hi, I'm Michelle. So can you explain a little more about transformissions and could that be a course through Renaissance? And if it is already, I apologize. I don't know.
Is.
I didn't see it in the catalog.
is.
Okay.
I know. It's just 6 weeks long. It doesn't run for a whole semester, and I'm only doing it in the spring semester because it seems to work really well after New Year's. You know, after New Year's, people have that clean slate mentality. Like, I can conquer the world. Good. Come on into this class and figure out your purpose and start there. So yeah, but this is only the second spring semester, so it is still relatively new in Renaissance Society years. Only 20 people in the room, and it's not on Zoom and it's not recorded. And again, that's because so many personal things are shared and a lot of tears are shed, and you just don't want that ever to be betrayed in any way. So it's kept a little bit quiet. Yes, it's in the catalog, but yeah, you won't find any recordings of it for that reason.
Could you go a little bit more into what service is and your definition? Because that's one of the.
Yeah. Service is anything you don't do for yourself. Really, the service in terms of this conversation is anywhere where you would volunteer, anywhere where you would teach, anywhere you would go into the community and say, I want to interact. I want to do something as a volunteer or even as a paid person. I want to do something that is not for me. Anything that's outside of yourself, I think, qualifies as service.
This is from the Zoom audience. So I can see that loneliness can create health problems. Could this also work the other way? And is loneliness sometimes caused by one's health problems? And I would add, how would you address that?
Can you repeat the second part of that?
Is loneliness sometimes caused by one's health problems?
Oh, yeah, I guess it is. Sure. If you have a health situation where you can't be out and you can't be of service and you can't interact with people, then I guess that would cause loneliness. I'm an only child, so, you know, this many people in a room, and I'm but only children also know how to deal with loneliness because we've never known anything else. We can solve problems without thinking, we're quick on our feet, and we know how to deal with loneliness. So some of us have that built-in capacity. And it's interesting for anyone in this room, no matter what your family of origin, to figure out how you deal with loneliness. How do you handle it? Do you feel like you're equipped, or does it just totally freak you out? Because there are both sets of people and a lot of it in the middle.
Deborah made an announcement. I think might have been before we were even on the Zoom connection, about how we can read the recorder and figure out ways to support the students on campus at their affinity centers. And it seems like it was a wonderful introduction to all that you've been talking about today. So I don't know if you can address that a little bit and how easy it is for us to make that connection. And you never know where it's going to lead to.
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Pam. I appreciate that comment. And first of all, I would just really like to have you give a wonderful welcome and thank you to Donna. And if anyone is searching for purpose in life, the Renaissance Society needs a vice president to step up. Yeah. So just see Deanna Hansen here. Yeah. But thank you, Pam. Yes, I think this is a wonderful opportunity for us to begin to connect with some of the students on campus. And I don't know what we can really do in any concrete way for them, but I think the moral support it goes a long way. So thank you for that. The affinity centers, there are a variety of affinity centers, which I've tried to list in the newsletter. They range from the Dreamer Center, the Pride Center, the Women's Resource Center. And I will share with you that I have been contacted by somebody from the Swana Center. This is the Southwest Asian North African Center, and they have kind of a unique set of issues for their students who are also feeling uncomfortable in the current environment. So they have reached out to see what we might put together for them. And also, I have been contacted by the person who is over the Women's Resource Center, the Pride Center, the CERNA Center, some of those who are feeling possibly directly threatened by adverse harassment, deportation, whatever it might be. And I actually sat in on a webinar yesterday that was sponsored by the university in connection with a group down in Los Angeles that talked about, it was called a Know Your Rights workshop. So there are organizations in somebody mentioned to me a group called NorCal Resist, ACLU. There are various organizations in the community that we might be interested as individuals in joining and to see what we can possibly do. So I think in the current environment there may be some real opportunities to do some nice work with the students.
Thanks, Deborah. Thanks, Deborah. And one more question over here and one down here. So oh, you have the mic already. Okay.
I just kind of want to bring this up. It's an aside, but it's so connected to what you're doing here. I retired after a career of doing executive coaching, and a lot of that was just about connecting with people. And now that I'm in retirement, I've found that this business of loneliness, it shows up in a lot of different ways. And I connect with folks. I'm a big joke guy. I already told these two a couple of jokes. And what I've found is when I'm out in public,
They don't look happy about that, by the way.
Especially with like service people, if you finish your transaction, whatever it is, and then I will typically say, well, I have one more question for you. And it's my I'll tell them a joke. And it happens like at the grocery store for checkout folks, at the post office, these folks are getting hammered with, all these requests and getting yelled at a lot. And I find when I tell them a joke, it completely changes their demeanor. It's like you've just peeled off this layer and they become these human people and you make this human connection and you can just see it kind of changes their day. So learn jokes and tell people jokes. That's
And one last question down here. Right there. Right, Mike, come back. Yes, you.
This is, first of all, thank you. And this is more of a comment about the intergenerational. I'm recalling an experience when I was in my 50s and I went back to school. It was in a topic that I knew nothing about, anatomy. And I was paired studying with a young woman who was about 21, who was an anatomical science genius. And I, many years older than her, had a career in marketing and writing. And we found ourselves in a study group together, the two of us. She suggested we meet at McDonald's. I arrived with my organic fruit container, and she was scarfing down fries. And we sat basically head to head looking through all of these different bones and ligaments. The thing is, her writing skills were not strong, and she was needing scholarship assistance. And in that interaction, I ended up volunteering to help her with her scholarship application, which she did receive funds. And I mean, that was many years ago, but I look back to that beautiful exchange because I would not typically ever go to McDonald's and spend the whole afternoon there. But we were united by a common purpose. And I am hungry for that in learning, that was an unusual situation. I don't want to have to go back to school to reconnect with that, but where our different generations and our different skill sets just blended together, and time, decades, distance all melted away. We were just trying to learn, about those oligodendrocyte cells and make them stick in our brain. And she could help me in a way, and I could help her. So it'd be an interesting way to explore how we recreate those kinds of connections.
Good. Thank you very much. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Michael, for passing the mic around. Thank you, Deborah and Deanna. Thank you, Rob and Trish. And don't forget to get your David Bowie card with the saying on it as you go out. Thanks to Trish.
Thanks once again, Donna. And as a token of our appreciation, we offer our forum speakers a honorary membership in the Renaissance Society, which you pretty much already have. And we also make a contribution in your name to the Seth Nelson Emergency Fund. So on this last slide, we encourage you, if you haven't already, to go online and donate to the food pantry. And next week, we have the mayor of West Sac coming to talk to us next week regarding some of the community benefits and challenges in putting together these big construction projects. So see us here a week from today to hear from Martha Guerrero. Thank you.